I thought I had arrived in heaven when I finally bought my cabin in the Colorado mountains. It was my reward after decades of working 12-hour shifts as a hospital administrator, saving every extra penny while raising my two kids. That Friday afternoon, I drove up the winding dirt road, craving nothing but the smell of pine trees and absolute silence. But as I rounded the final bend, my stomach dropped. Three unfamiliar cars were parked in my driveway. One of them belonged to my daughter-in-law, Sarah. I parked my SUV near the tree line, turned off the engine, and just watched for a minute. Nobody had asked to use the cabin. My son David had texted me a few days ago, vaguely mentioning they were staying in the city for the weekend. Clearly, that was a lie. I grabbed my purse, walked up the wooden steps, and pushed the front door open. I didn't knock. You don't knock on your own front door. Loud pop music blasted from my Bluetooth speaker. The living room I had carefully decorated with rustic, quiet charm was trashed. Empty beer bottles littered my oak coffee table. Wet towels were draped over my custom armchair. Sitting on my sofa, scrolling through her phone with a glass of my expensive red wine, was Sarah. Beside her were her parents, two loud, entitled people I had only met twice. Sarah looked up, and her relaxed smile instantly vanished, replaced by a dark scowl. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, completely unbothered by the fact that she was sitting in my living room. "I could ask you the same question," I replied, keeping my voice dangerously low. Her father stood up, puffing out his chest. "David gave us the keys. We're having a family weekend. You need to leave, Brenda. You're interrupting." Sarah crossed her arms, a smug look crossing her face. "You heard him. Get out. You're trespassing on our private vacation. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police to report an intruder." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just pulled my phone out of my pocket and gestured toward the door. "Go ahead. I'd love to see how this plays out." Sarah sneered clearly, thinking I was bluffing. She actually dialed 911 on speakerphone, playing the terrified victim flawlessly. She told the dispatcher a crazy old woman had barged into their mountain retreat and was refusing to leave. I stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, waiting in total silence. Her parents smirked at me, whispering about how embarrassing I was acting. 15 minutes later, tires crunched on the gravel. Two local county officers walked up to the porch. Sarah rushed to the door, pointing a manicured finger right at my chest. "Officers, thank goodness that's her. She just walked in and started harassing us." The older officer sighed, looking between the two of us. "Ma'am, is this your property?" he asked Sarah. "It belongs to my husband," she lied smoothly. "His mother has no right to just barge in." I unzipped my purse, pulled out the thick leather folder I always carry for property emergencies, and handed it directly to the officer. Inside was the property deed, the latest tax bill, and the utility statement, all bearing one name, Brenda Matthews. The officer scanned the documents, his expression hardening. He handed them back to me and turned to Sarah, whose smug smile was beginning to crack. "Ma'am, this property belongs solely to Mrs. Matthews. Do you have her permission to be here?" Sarah's face turned completely pale. "But David said—" "I don't care what David said," I interrupted calmly. "I want them out. Now!" The officer nodded. "You heard the owner. You have 20 minutes to pack your things and vacate the premises, or you'll be arrested for trespassing." The panic in the room was electric. Sarah's mother gasped, clutching her chest, while her father cursed under his breath. They scrambled around the cabin, violently shoving clothes and wet towels into trash bags. Sarah glared at me with pure hatred as she marched past, but I didn't flinch. I just stood on the porch, watching their taillights disappear down the mountain. But I knew this wasn't over. David was going to be a problem. The silence of the mountain returned, but my peace was ruined. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up their mess. They had gone through my pantry-eaten food I had stored for the winter and actually moved my family photos into a closet to replace them with framed pictures of Sarah's family. That little detail told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just borrowing the cabin, they were taking it over. Sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of black coffee, I opened my laptop. I had always been generous with David. When his father died, I wanted to make sure my son was stable. I paid for his college, helped with his wedding, and even now I knew my money was woven into his daily life. I logged into my banking portal and started doing the math. I paid the $400 monthly premium for their car insurance. I covered the $150 family cell phone plan. Worse, 2 years ago, when David cried about missing his mortgage payment, I set up a $600 automatic monthly transfer to his account to help them get by. I stared at the screen. Over $100 a month. While they were treating me like a stray dog in my own home, I was funding their lifestyle. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from our shared Amazon account. Sarah had just ordered a $300 espresso machine using the credit card linked to my bank. She was angry, and she was trying to spend my money to feel better. I took a deep breath. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt stupid. But stupidity can be fixed. I clicked it on the Amazon order and canceled it. Then I opened a new tab on my browser. It was time to stop being the family bank. I knew David would try to guilt trip me tomorrow, but he was going to find a very different mother waiting for him. I spent the next hour clicking through every financial portal I had. With cold surgical precision, I deleted the $600 monthly transfer to David's checking account. Next, I logged into the auto insurance website. I removed David and Sarah's vehicles from my policy entirely. Finally, I opened the phone provider's page. I couldn't cancel their lines without a massive fee, but I could suspend them. I clicked the button, locking both of their cell phones from making calls, sending texts, or using data. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a warning text. I just shut off the faucet. At 7:00 a.m. the next morning, my iPad chimed. It was an email from David, completely frantic. "Mom, my phone isn't working. The Wi-Fi at the house is down too. Sarah says her Amazon order got canceled. Did you get hacked? Call me at my office immediately." He didn't even mention the cabin. He didn't apologize for his wife calling the police on me. He only cared that the free ride had suddenly hit a speed bump. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, walked out onto the wooden deck, and watched the morning mist roll over the pine trees. I didn't reply. By noon, my email inbox was flooded. David had finally realized this wasn't a glitch. "Mom, Sarah told me what happened at the cabin. She just panicked. You can't just cut off our insurance. It's illegal to drive without it. Please turn the money transfer back on. We have bills." I typed a very brief reply. "You are 32 years old. Figure it out. Do not come to the cabin." I closed the laptop. The boundaries were set. But knowing Sarah's controlling nature and David's spineless panic, I knew they wouldn't just accept this quietly. They were going to show up. Sure enough, at 3:00 p.m. on Sunday, David's sedan sped up the driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust. I was sitting on the porch swing, a book in my lap, waiting. David slammed his car door and marched up the steps. Sarah was right behind him, her face red with fury. "Mom, this is insane," David yelled, stopping at the bottom of the porch stairs. "You can't just ruin our lives over a misunderstanding. Sarah's parents had nowhere to go this weekend. And they have their own apartment," I stated flatly. "And you gave them the keys to my house without asking." Sarah pushed past him. "You humiliated my parents. You had the cops throw us out like criminals, and now you're financially abusing your own son. You owe us that mortgage money. We budgeted for it." I almost laughed. I owe you nothing, Sarah. I've been paying your bills while you disrespected me. That arrangement ended yesterday. David ran a hand through his hair, pacing in the dirt. Mom, please, turn the insurance back on. Sarah needs her car for work. We can't afford a new policy right now. Then she should take the bus, I replied, turning a page in my book. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You know what, fine? Keep your stupid money. But we want our stuff from the cabin. My dad left his expensive golf clubs in the garage and I left my blender in the kitchen. Give them to us now. I closed my book and looked down at her. I already checked the garage. There are no golf clubs. And you brought a blender, but it's not yours. I recognize it. It's the one I bought for my own kitchen in the city. Sarah froze. She had tried to steal my kitchen appliances to furnish the cabin for herself. Get off my property, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Before I call the same officers you tried to use on me. They left peeling out of the driveway in a fit of rage. I stayed at the cabin for a few more days to ensure the locks I changed held up, but my mind was spinning. Sarah's attempt to take my blender got me thinking about my house back in Denver. Since my husband passed, I occasionally let David use the garage there to store his winter gear, giving him a spare key to the back door. On Wednesday, I packed my bags and drove back down the mountain. I didn't call David. I didn't warn him. I pulled into my own driveway in Denver, walked around to the back, and found the deadbolt locked. I used my master key. The garage was mostly fine, but when I walked into the guest bedroom, I stopped dead in my tracks. My beautiful antique sewing machine, a family heirloom, was gone. Several expensive power tools from the basement were missing too. I didn't panic. I just picked up my phone and called my daughter Kelly, who lived a few towns over. Kelly had always been independent, the exact opposite of David. Mom, she answered. Are you okay? David has been calling me nonstop, crying that you've gone crazy. I'm fine, honey, I said, walking through my house to check for anything else missing. Did David happen to mention where my antique sewing machine is? Kelly sighed heavily into the receiver. Mom, Sarah sold it. I saw it on her Facebook Marketplace page 3 weeks ago. She listed it as old junk taking up space. I thought you gave it to her. My grip on the phone tightened. It wasn't enough that they were draining my bank accounts. They were quietly selling off my possessions. Thanks, Kelly. Don't tell David. We spoke, I said. I hung up. I didn't need the police. I didn't need a lawyer to sue them for a sewing machine. I had the spare key to David's house, the one he gave me for emergencies. It was time to run an errand. I knew David and Sarah were both at work until 5:00 p.m. I drove over to their suburban house at 2:00 p.m. I unlocked the front door and walked in. The house I had given them a $40,000 down payment for was a mess. I wasn't there to trash the place. I walked straight to the kitchen counter where they kept a bowl of spare keys. I sifted through it and found exactly what I was looking for: the spare key to my Denver house and the old key to the mountain cabin. I dropped them into my pocket. Then I went to their home office. I wanted to see exactly what they had been planning. On the desk sitting in plain sight was a printed short-term rental agreement. I picked it up. Sarah had printed out a contract to rent out my Colorado cabin on Airbnb. She had taken photos of the cabin during her family weekend and was planning to list it under her name, pocketing the profit while I paid the taxes and utilities. I folded the paper and put it in my purse. Before I left, I walked into their living room. Mounted on the wall was the massive 75-inch smart TV I had bought them for Christmas last year. I unplugged the power cord, wrapped it neatly, and shoved it into my bag. It was petty maybe, but I bought it and I was taking a small piece of my generosity back. I locked their front door behind me and drove away. An hour later, I called a locksmith to my Denver house. By dinner time, every lock on my property was brand new. The access they had to my life was permanently severed. I poured a glass of wine, sat in my living room, and waited for the explosion. The explosion happened at 6:30 p.m. David called using a new prepaid phone number. "Mom, did you break into our house?" he screamed. "Where is the TV cord? And Sarah says her Airbnb papers are missing." "I didn't break in, David. I used the emergency key you gave me," I replied calmly, sipping my wine. "I took back my house keys. And I took the power cord as a down payment for the antique sewing machine your wife stole and sold." "She didn't steal it. You weren't using it," he stammered. "You were planning to rent out my cabin, David, my sanctuary. You were going to let strangers sleep in my bed so Sarah could make a quick buck. We need the money, Mom. Because you cut us off, my car got repossessed this morning. I couldn't make the payment without your transfer." His voice broke into a desperate sob. "Sarah is threatening to leave me. Her parents are furious. You're destroying my marriage." "I didn't destroy your marriage. I just stopped paying for it," I stated. "You are a grown man. You let your wife disrespect me, you stole from me, and you lied to my face. The bank of Mom is closed. Forever. Please," he begged, sounding like a little boy. "Just pay the car recovery fee. I'll pay you back. I swear. If I lose my job because I don't have a car, we lose the house." "Then you better buy a bicycle," I said, and ended the call. I blocked the new number. My heart hammered in my chest, a mix of adrenaline and lingering sadness. It hurt to hear my son cry. It hurt to know he was struggling. But giving in now would only teach him that my boundaries were fake. I had to stand firm. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. It was Kelly. She walked in carrying 2 bags of groceries and a warm smile. "I brought dinner," she said, setting the bags on the counter. "I figured you could use some company." We cooked together in comfortable silence. As we ate, Kelly finally brought it up. "David called me again today. He asked if he could borrow $5,000. I told him absolutely not." I looked down at my plate. "How bad is it?" "Bad," Kelly admitted. "Sarah is furious because she actually has to work extra shifts now. She's been posting passive-aggressive quotes on Facebook about toxic family members. But Mom, you did the right thing. David has been bragging for months to his friends about how he basically owns your cabin. He told everyone you were too old to go up there anyway." A cold realization washed over me. It wasn't just Sarah. David had fully participated in erasing me from my own life. "He needs to hit rock bottom," I said quietly. "He does." Kelly agreed, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "And you need to stop feeling responsible for a 32-year-old man's choices." After dinner, Kelly helped me pack my car. I was heading back to the mountain cabin. I didn't want to stay in the city anymore. The air in Denver felt too heavy, too full of expectations. I wanted the cold, sharp wind of Colorado. I wanted the space that was purely mine. Before I left, I transferred the remaining joint funds I had with David into a private solo account. I mailed him the final statement with a short note: "Do not contact me until you can support yourself." I hugged Kelly goodbye. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about anyone else's emergencies. I was only in charge of my own life. Weeks turned into months. Winter arrived in the mountains, covering my cabin in a thick, glittering blanket of white snow. I spent my days reading by the fireplace, drinking good wine, and walking through the frozen woods. Through Kelly, I heard updates about David's life. Without my money, reality hit them hard. They couldn't afford their big house. They had to sell it and downsize to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment. Sarah's parents couldn't move in with them, forcing them to finally figure out their own living situation. David was working a second job on weekends just to cover their basic bills. He hadn't reached out to me. Maybe he was too proud. Or maybe he was finally learning how to be an adult. I didn't hate him. I still loved my son, but I loved him enough to let him face the consequences of his actions. One crisp Tuesday morning, I was sitting on my porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, watching a pair of deer pick through the snow. My phone sat quietly on the small wooden table next to me. It didn't ring with demands. It didn't buzz with financial emergencies. I thought about Sarah's shocked face when the police kicked her out. I thought about the heavy burden of the $100 a month I had been blindly giving away. I breathed in the sharp, pine-scented air. I was 64 years old. I had survived a demanding career, raised two children, and buried a husband. I had earned this peace. And nobody, not an entitled daughter-in-law, not a greedy son, was ever going to take it away from me again. I picked up my coffee mug, took a warm sip, and smiled at the silent, beautiful mountains.